Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you this evening to our program. So I'm going to invite the panelists to share their videos. we're just trying to check if everything is working as it should, and so give us a second or two to just make sure everything is running as it should. Yes, it looks like it is. If there are any challenges with the sound, please just type in the chat of the Facebook page, then we'll pick it up if there are any things which are concerning you. As I said, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are, or good afternoon, in case you're in a place where it is afternoon or morning. Welcome to our Leadership Symposium, as we call it. Maybe it is the first of a number of leadership symposia as we engage on topical and relevant topics or issues in our society, especially from a Christian perspective. Those who are watching, you can share the link of this live stream. You just go to the bottom of the Facebook page, and there is a share button there. You pick the link and then you share as wide as possible. My name is Alvin Masarira. I'm the convener for today's conversation, and I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. With me are three panelists who are held in very high regard because of their experiences as leaders, both in society and in the Christian church. As advertised, our topic is the church, migration, and June 30. Those in South Africa or in Southern Africa know what June 30 means. We will get to that in a moment. This topic is inspired by the current events in this country concerning undocumented foreign nationals. We hope we can do justice to unpack this complex and emotional, complicated subject, especially from a Christian perspective. We really want to think about the question, what can we do? What is the role of the church, the role of believers in such an environment? The four of us, all of us who are here on the panel, are Christians of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have to say this so that when we talk about church processes and church policies and how we do things, we know that at least we're talking from the Seventh-day Adventist perspective. Other Christian churches might have different ways of doing things, but there are commonalities among the Christian community around how do we engage with complex, societal, controversial issues. I also want to mention this before we go any further, that none of us here speaks with a mandate from anyone. We don't represent the organization, we don't represent the government. We are just concerned Christian brothers who just are sharing their personal views. And so that's important that we say that. So whatever we say here is effectively our own, hopefully, Christian views. We have Dr. Linus Chata, one of the panelists with us. He is currently the Chief Executive Director of Highgate College in Windhoek, Namibia. He is a former CEO of Namibia Press Agency. He served at the African Union in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, in Nairobi, Kenya, for over 10 years. Before that, as a senior training officer. And before that, he was a member of the National Assembly of Parliament for the Republic of Namibia. Thank you, Dr. Chata, for being here, and thank you for your time. Then I also have advocate of the High Court of KwaZulu-Natal, Dr. Phumlani Majola. He is a former executive secretary of the KwaZulu-Natal Free State Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in South Africa. He also served as the head of the Ecumenical Relations Research of the KwaZulu-Natal Christians Council. So he's a pastor and a theologian and an experienced leader. We also have Pastor Clifford Nhlapo, pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, former chairperson of the Eastern Transvaal Peace Committee in the 1990s, former secretary of the Southeast region of the South African Council of Churches, a recipient of Golden Dove Peace Award in the United Nations International Volunteer Award, former president of the KwaZulu-Natal Free State Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in South Africa. So as you can see, we have quite a good panel of experienced leaders in the church and also in the community. Welcome, gentlemen. Just one comment on the side before we start. Somebody asked, why are there no females on the panel? We will try next time. We are working on it on part 2 to have ladies and hear their views. Before we go into the conversation, I just want to start with a quotation or with a statement which I read from Benjamin Abraham Horowitz. He's a businessman, investor, blogger, and author, an American businessman. He said, hard things are hard because there are no easy answers or recipes. Hard things are fundamentally difficult because they lack a clear roadmap. They challenge us because they demand we confront uncertainty, push past natural resistance, and make tough decisions. So I guess South Africa and the SADC region, and maybe the greater part of the African continent, finds itself in one of those hard places. And we all agree that such a time requires wisdom and leadership. And once again, as Christians, believers, we need to stand up and be counted. And so as we go into this conversation, let's keep that in mind, that as Christians, as believers, we need to stand up and be counted. If you have any questions and comments, you can type them in the chat. We'll pick them up, and then we will try and deal with them as much as we can. So I'm going to start with Dr. Chata, who, as I said, who served at the African Union and also as a member of parliament in Namibia. So he maybe better than any one of us understands the politics and the issues around Africa. I think you understand Africa more than all of us. Maybe you can help us unpack a bit from the African perspective before we narrow it down to South Africa and then to the church. Paint us a bit of a picture, brief but clear. Africa, 55 nations, 1.5 billion people, 1,000 distinct groups, ethnic groups, over 2,000 languages. What does migration look like? What are the pull and push factors in Africa? How big is this story?
Thank you, Dr. Masarira, and convener of this very important discussion. As stated by the facilitator, I'll be sharing from the point of someone who worked in the organization, but not a representative of the organization. So it's very possible that some information that I'll be sharing maybe is not as current as it is in the organization today. However, the information is public on the African Union and its operations. So let me start by saying the earliest account of migration in the Bible is that of Abram, who later became Abraham, as recorded in the book of Genesis in chapter 12. So we can rightly say migration is as old as human history. And it will continue to be as long as human beings confront problems and for as long as they seek solutions to those problems. So there are many factors that cause people to move from one place to the other. Some can be broadly categorized as push factors. The conditions around one's environment become difficult, that they find themselves moving. It does not have to be political. It can be environmental. It can be, civil, strife. It can be natural calamities, wars, floods, and many, many other reasons, and political, of course. These are push factors that make people move from one place to the other. And there are pull factors. You know, the conditions, like they say, the grass appears greener on the other side. For that reason, when one thinks things are better on the other side, when they have the means and they see opportunities to go to the other side, they really do move. So those are the many reasons that make people move from one place to the other. So migration is therefore a global phenomenon. We are all aware, as we speak today, that there are migration issues and problems in Europe, in America, in Asia, and of course, many parts of Africa experience migration and its challenges. But one thing common, about migration, regardless of where it occurs, is that it occurs, or people are directed or move to developed parts of the world. So the developed parts of the world seem to attract more migrants than the less developed. Of course, for the reasons I've stated, for push factors, for pull factors, obviously, one would go to a place where they think is better than where they are. So you find that places that are considered well-developed attract more migrants than other places. For example, in the context of Africa, we find that countries like Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, seem to attract more migrants than their neighboring countries, because these countries in the region are better economically and otherwise. In the SADC region, obviously, the reason we are having this conversation is that South Africa, excuse me, attracts more migrants than her neighbors, because of what South Africa is economically and otherwise. So because of the reality, excuse me, because of the reality of migration on the African continent, and more so on the global scale, and also being aware that migration is relevant in many aspects, the African Union and the different regional economic communities have come up with a number of protocols, programs, and policies, and policy framework that talk to the free movement of people, so that people can manage the impact of migration. The impact can be both negative or positive, but as a regional body, the African Union, therefore, has developed a number of instruments that speak to the free movement of people within the continent, and perhaps even outside the continent. One such policy document I found very interesting, maybe for the purpose of discussion, is the Migration Policy Framework for Africa and its action plan. This document provides a comprehensive framework for managing migration across the continent. The policy framework, among other things, emphasizes the protection of migrants, the combating of human trafficking, and managing forced displacements, which in the context of match to match, one would anticipate there possibly can be forced displacement of people. Excuse me. So from the policy perspective, the African Union has instruments in place that serve as, reference documents, policy framework to to guide and support countries that find themselves in a situation where they have to deal with migration at a different level. So let me stop it there for now.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I think it was important that you sort of paint that picture. I know we spoke about migrants and all that. There is the question of the illegal migrants. Does the AU, just in one line, is there anything where the AU speaks about illegal migrants or undocumented migrants? I know illegal is a sounds maybe too undocumented. I mean, people cross borders without documents or papers. Does AU have anything to say about it, or they just leave it to the national countries?
Yes. Yeah, because the AU is a supranational, organization. It will not go to the nitty-gritties of prescribing, to the member states on how to deal with some specific issues like how to handle illegal or undocumented migrants. That's why the policy framework only speaks to the issues of how do you manage movement of people, for whatever reason, whether they are internally displaced or they are forced to move out of their country. And normally when you move out of your country, you might not have the necessary document and pressure. I mean, the time to organize yourself. There are people who find themselves crossing borders because of war, because of natural calamities and whatever. So the African Union as a continental body would only provide broad framework to say, yeah, member states, these are realities. So find mechanisms of treating people that are not of your country. So there is no specific guidance.
Yeah, Glenn, yeah. Because I think
deal with undocumented migrants.
Yeah, because the conditions always differ. Pastor Nhlapo, any views on? I mean, you have had a lot of experience in Africa with Africa. How should we view the issue of migrants, whether documented or undocumented? I'm not sure that question is specific enough, but I think it's good enough for you to get a start. Yeah, I think you know. Yeah.
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, not as extensive in knowledge as your Dr. Chata there, who I think gave a very good backdrop of the migration issue and challenge on the continent. But the one thing that one can glean, even from his presentation, is that migration is a phenomena that is common to almost countries on the African continent and beyond. It is not unique to the Republic of South Africa. It is a phenomena that needs the attention of policymakers, either at AU level or any other agencies that are run by various governments in Africa, to manage and hopefully mitigate the reality of migration. Now, you've just asked a question about illegal or undocumented migrants. Now, I know sometimes when we refer to persons as illegal in any given country, that sounds pejorative. That sounds like it's a negative labeling of persons. But the fact of the matter is, within the migration reality. You do have persons that go beyond their own national boundaries and borders into other countries without the requisite papers or documents to be in those countries, and effectively become illegal for the fact that they are undocumented. Now, among those people, you could have people who justifiably come from countries of strife, where there is war, where they have been displaced from place to place within their own countries. And when they get to places like South Africa, for instance, and apply for asylum seeker permits, and hopefully beyond asylum seeker status, every asylum seeker wishes to be a refugee in South Africa. But we know how difficult it has been over the past almost 15, 18, 20 years even, to upgrade asylum seekers to become documented refugees in South Africa. We don't have refugee camps in this country. So what happens when people arrive, and those that do manage to acquire the status as asylum seekers, they basically disappear within the various communities of South Africa and become, after a while, illegal, because some of them do not return to renew the very asylum seeker permit that they have. And so they just disappear there, and law enforcement, they just, go through the net, basically. And that is why you have very, very few classified refugees in South Africa. There are not even 180,000 in total after all these years. And similarly so, asylum seekers are also not over 200,000 in South Africa. Now the question is, who are these almost 2.4 million, 3 million? Of course, it depends on which survey you are using there to determine and establish, who are these people who are undocumented, who are called illegal migrants in South Africa. It is the same people, some of whom came legally with documents. Some came from countries like your DRC or Burundi and other countries, South Sudan, where there is war, and came to this country and were granted some status, and that status would be asylum seeker. But after a while, the permits expire and the people disappear within the crowd in the country. And so much as we would avoid, as much as we can, using the term that sounds very pejorative, as I've indicated, that you do have illegal migrants, and those are the undocumented persons that are in the country in South Africa. We cannot avoid using that. The question, though, is to what extent can we manage as a faith movement? We are not a government agency. We are a faith movement. We belong to the greater family of churches, if you please. We may not be aligned. We are non-aligned. We are not SACC aligned. We are not aligned to the African independent churches. We are not aligned to any organized structure of faith movements in this country. But as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, the question is, how do we assist on an interface basis to collaborate and to partner strategically with organized structures, either in government, either in the NGO sector, or in the faith movements in the country? how can we partner with them with a view to alleviate this situation that we are sitting with in South Africa? Because if we don't intervene at some level, if we do not intervene in this situation, we are going to be culpable as a church in that we have a vast membership in our churches that consists of persons from other nationalities and who are not documented. So in order to avoid being culpable and risk being targeted as well, we need to proactively identify structures and organizations that we can partner with so that we find a common solution to the situation of what I would call illegal migration in South Africa.
Thank you, Pastor Nhlapo. I think it was important that for you to share that. Dr. Majola, what is it? I'm trying to find the better way of phrasing this question. Is it legitimate to claim? I know you are not part of the statistics essay, but to claim that undocumented migrants are putting pressure on South African resources, whether it's education, health, housing, jobs. It's a legitimate claim. I'm not going to ask you to justify whether it's a yes or no, because somebody can ask you, how do you know how many there are? Anyway, that's another question. So it's legitimate claim. I mean, I'm trying to understand, is the claim really legitimate? Is it something we need to take seriously?
Yeah, look, I think that thank you for the opportunity to be part of the panel, and good evening to everybody. Since I'm talking for the first time, I start with the greetings. Good evening to you as facilitator, and of course my fellow panelists and whoever is part of is listening to this conversation. I think it's important what you said, that I do not have the statistics in as far as the extent or the degree to which we have illegal or undocumented foreign nationals in our country, in South Africa. So my answer cannot speak really to the degree or the extent, but it is the lived experience, I believe, and it is common sense that if you have hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are undocumented in any country, they will exert some level of impact in as far as resources in the country are concerned. Financial resources, it can be any other types of resources as well, health services and so forth. So where there's a human being, there is a dependence on the environment for livelihood, for existence, for pursuit of happiness. And if you have hundreds of thousands, and I understand there are millions of them, I don't know how many millions, certainly they will have there is an extent to which their presence in the country does take from the resources of our country. If that was not the case, then they would not have come to the country. They've come to the country, yes, of course, to contribute if they can, in as far as their abilities are concerned, their skills, but primarily because they want to acquire a livelihood, a better life. And to that extent, there will be a taking away, so to speak, of the resources. But the people that you hear a lot speak about are complaining about the resources by foreign nationals, undocumented foreign nationals in particular. They speak from their own experiences in townships, for example, where you have people who are undocumented, no matter what the ratio or percentage is, but there will be people who are going to feel their presence. Someone who is not in that corner of the township or maybe resides elsewhere outside of that township might not feel as much as those in that township will feel. So one cannot quantify the extent of the impact in terms of resources, because obviously if they're undocumented, then you can't track them. their movements and exactly as to where and what they do, when they do it, what's the impact. But it is something that is common sense. It makes sense that if there are people who come into any country and who do so unlawfully, um, also because of the limitations they will have in terms of the legal system of the country. For example, if you are undocumented, you cannot get employment. Although, of course, there are some employers who will break the law and violate the law, but you can't get employment. And then you are in a situation where you have limitations in the kind of work that you can do as to where you can work. You then get some of those who are undocumented, not all of them, some of them who then tend to go towards criminality to sustain themselves. Not that criminality is confined to undocumented foreign nationals. Even South Africans, some of them are into crime. I'm not saying that only undocumented foreign nationals are culprits of crime, are criminals. But that would be a tendency, because if you need to hide from law enforcement, stay away from SARS, stay away from the police, stay away from the detecting agencies in the country, but at the same time you need to have a livelihood, you are going to end up generally speaking, embarking in sources of livelihood, which will, in some cases or in many cases, be stained with criminality. So I think your question was, is it a legitimate concern? I think it is, but it can't be measured because we don't have the statistics. But it is certainly the case that if any person moves to another country, they are obviously going to be contributing and taking away from that country. So I think for now, I'll just stop there in response to your question. Yeah.
Thank you. I asked that question for a very specific reason. One of the, this country has been struggling with this question for a long time. It's not a new question. It comes and goes. One of the issues which I picked up, in the last few weeks as I was thinking about this, I got two terms: scapegoating and gaslighting. So scapegoating means you blame people for whatever problems you say because of this. And it's not a new thing. In the Third Reich, the Adolf Hitler in Germany, scapegoating with the Jews. So it's everywhere. With the gypsies in other parts of Europe. So scapegoating. So foreign nationals, documented or undocumented, have said we are being blamed for the problems of this country, which we are not actually the cause of. We can debate about why are there no jobs, why are there no houses, why are there no schools. That's another discussion. So then the nationals say, well, it's gaslighting. Gaslighting, I also learned that word very late in my life. It basically means you make me feel guilty for feeling guilty, for raising a genuine concern. I say to you, I'm feeling cold, and then you argue against me that why are you feeling cold? You are weak. You see. So they are saying we raising legitimate concerns from our lived experiences. We live with this in our communities, and when we raise it, we now feel, you make us feel guilty for raising that. So and that's the space this conversation is taking place. Depending how you see it, and we struggle with that issue. And so, Dr. Chata, you don't live in South Africa, you are a Namibian citizen, but the idea of tension between the citizens and non-citizens, it happens also in the villages. Yeah, in our villages, there are people, families which came who don't belong there; they just moved there, and there's a tension between the people in the communities. How do you deal with that without one side feeling blame?
Yes, the tension will always be there when there is contact between, the outsider and the insider. It's a human, unavoidable situation. It calls for wisdom on how, therefore, do you deal with the reality of the tension. I'll hasten to say that the concerns coming from South African citizens in their lived experience cannot be minimized. They cannot be made small because they are the arbiters of their own experiences. No one can say you don't feel that way when you are feeling that way. And when they are voiced at a national, perhaps even international levels, they become issues that need attention. The question is, who should pay attention to this and how should these be attended to? It leads me to perhaps an attempt to answer the first question that came in the chat. If I may transition that way, just try to get to the heart of the issue. The question is, how does the church, how should the church deal with undocumented migrants, for example? See, the challenge to that question is that it should be a question that's followed by the first question of how should the church identify the undocumented migrants because before you deal with them, you have to know them. And that leads me to the question of governance. The church as an institution is not in the best place to handle the question of the governance around migrants, around people who come in the country and out of the country, and identifying them. It's a difficult expectation to place on a church because the mechanism and the structure and the posture of the church itself renders it a little difficult. Therefore, it goes to the government. The government is in the right place to create and enforce policies and monitor compliance and non-compliance. The church as a non-state agency would find it very difficult to identify who is legal, who is not legal, and therefore do what should be done at an institutional level. But at an organizational level, let's say the church as a registered legal person, let's say the SAU, for example, is an organization. It employs both locals and foreign nationals. At that level, the church is very answerable as to who is in its employ. If the church at that level finds itself employing an undocumented migrant, it's easy to deal with that because it's the church as an organization is registered. It can be followed where it is. It can be held accountable because it's an administrative organ. But when it comes to the institution, the purpose for which it exists, that is of spreading the gospel. It spreads the gospel to everybody. It's like, for example, in the case of South Africa, we have a ShopRite, we have an MTN, whose job is to provide goods for people to buy and eat as ShopRite. MTN is a telecom institution. So how easy and how difficult would it be to expect ShopRite to identify an undocumented customer? Because the job of ShopRite is really to provide consumables, daily convenience goods. Yeah. That's all it's qualified to do. So that is the challenge of the church being expected to have a way of getting to identify and therefore deal with undocumented church members, for example.
Let me put Pastor Nhlapo on the spot here, and I'm going to be very careful how I frame this. it is common knowledge that among all four of us here, you have the most experience as an administrator in the church. We have been elders. Pastor Majola was in the executive secretariat. You have the most experience. Now, please put us. I mean, is it from your experience, long experience in the church? Is it something which has ever come to be discussed? And I'm talking about the church across. Remember, there are undocumented immigrants in Lesotho and Eswatini and Namibia, which also fall in our union. This is, there are undocumented migrants in America, in the North America division of our church. There are undocumented migrants in Europe who are members of the church. So this issue is not just about South Africa in terms of church and undocumented migrants. Has it ever been an issue in the knowledge where the church said, we need to look at this thing?
The Adventist church in general, and of course one will zoom into the church in South Africa particularly, but the Adventist church in general is not known historically to engage in advocacy activities. We are not known to get our hands dirty in engaging issues, contemporary issues of a socio-political nature in this country. We are not known to do that. Earlier on, I said we are non-aligned. We've always been non-aligned. We have witnessed other faith structures like the South African Council of Churches and others engaging real issues, having conferences and coming up with policy positions beyond those conferences. And one of those is the migration issue. The migration issue. And one can go back to the apartheid days when the Kairos document was formulated, when the Institute of Contextual Theology, the ICT, the SACC, and others engaged real issues. The Adventist Church has never sat around the table to deal with issues, even back then. For instance, just to make an example, in the 50s, around 55, 56, 1957, in Johannesburg, there where you are, we had a hospital called Nobupila Hospital in Sophia Town. Our workers there at the hospital were subjected to very, very poor treatment by Adventist administration of the hospital. And the black pastors refused to get involved in alleviating the plight of the workers there. It took an Anglican priest, Father Trevor Huddleston, who came and spoke to Adventist administrators at the hospital with a view to have them change their attitude and their treatment of black workers there. And it's been like that for years. Now we are sitting with a question of illegal migration in South Africa. There is a groundswell in our township where our churches are. We have a conference, in this union that has more than 40 churches. I will not mention the name. You, Dr. Masarira, know which conference I'm talking about. And 95, in certain instances, 100% of the membership of these churches, more than 40 churches, are migrants in South Africa. And as Dr. Majola said, it's very difficult to get very reliable stats on some of these issues because we don't ask people at the door, are you documented or not? Are you legal or illegal? We don't do that. And so it's very difficult to get the exact figure of how many in those 40 churches, more than 40 churches, are actually documented migrants in South Africa. your guess is as good as mine that probably more than 90% of the membership of some of these churches are undocumented. And so your question is, has the church sat around the table to deal with, engage on the question of migration? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. If it has not happened in the past, it has to happen now. In fact, government as well has been caught napping on this issue of illegal migrants in South Africa. It is communities, it is civil society movements, unfortunately, with a tinge of vigilantism, some of them, that have arisen and have taken up this course, which has brought us to where we are right now. So to answer your question simply, has the church engaged on this issue? Do we have any policy statements that have come out around this question in our union? And my answer to you would be no. That has not happened. But that is not a surprise, because we are not known to engage on issues, as if we do not have a vast membership of persons who are not documented in our conference. Now, in our conferences. Now, I should say this. It is okay for the church to accept the tithe and the offerings, what we call trust funds. It is okay to accept trust funds from members that are not documented. And those trust funds that we have received over the years have basically stabilized the union. The union, not just the conferences. The union is what it is because of funding from illegal migrants in South Africa. That is why I'm saying, if the matter has not been engaged in the past, we have to engage it now. Of course, at the risk of losing both membership, we have a system that we call ACMS in the church. There are conferences that thought they had a significant membership in the books, but through the implementation of the ACMS system, those conferences have realized that their membership in certain instances has been cut in half. Now, migration is going to further cut membership, because we are sitting with a membership in our books that, according to policies of government, are not supposed to be in our books, because they are not supposed to be in the country. Now, I said earlier that perhaps the role that you and I should be playing when we sit in a conference room as Seventh-day Adventist administrators, perhaps what we should be asking ourselves is, how can we get involved? Because we're active stakeholders in this situation. We've got leadership that is not documented in our churches. We've got a membership that is not documented in our churches. We have churches that are being built throughout the Union Territory, built by human resource and by financial resources that are not supposed to be generated because the persons are undocumented. So we are active participants in the problem, in the challenge that we are sitting with. What can we do? With whom can we partner so that we alleviate this situation? Our members, 900 meters from where I am right now, at Sherwood, our members were at Sherwood today. For the 2 weeks, our members, Seventh-day Adventist members, were there in the open. We cannot stick our heads in the sand anymore as a church. We have to take this matter. It has not been discussed. Let it be discussed now. And if we need to be decisive, If we need to be intentional, let us do so. It's good to release a letter that asks the church to pray. We should do that. We are a praying agency, institute. But beyond that, there is something that you and I can do. And I hope to speak on it a little later in this discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Nhlapo. I think that was very important. That we say what we need to do. The reason why I asked the question, why the churches ever sit around the table at any level, because we seem to have a gap between how the church manages its people, not manage how people, manages its constituency, and how the state manages constituency. Let me give you the simple example, which you all know. If I were to move from Angola to South Africa as an Adventist, the process is, for those who might not know, I come to South Africa, I find a church I want to worship at, I feel comfortable there, I talk to this administration of that local church, and I say, look, my membership, Adventist Church is a member-based organization. We have members, people have to be a member of a local church in the books. So I say my membership is, okay, let me use my home country, Zimbabwe. Gweru or Javan or Mashingo, wherever I am. I say, okay, I want to transfer membership from my home church in my home country to the church I am worshiping now in South Africa. There is no way in the process where I am asked whether I am legally here or not. That's never asked. It's not, that's why I was asking the church, as far as I know, and I'm sure it's correct, there is no place where that is asked. The only question asked is where I was worshiping as a member, is my standing okay? If that church can say he was a member in good and regular standing, then I move membership, and automatically I become a member of this church in this country. No one has asked me whether I'm legally here or not. And so the church does its thing. End of the year, there are elections of leaders. I need to say this for those who might not know. Leaders at local churches are volunteers. They are not employees. They are volunteers. You are asked to serve in a capacity, elder, clerk, whatever. You are a volunteer. You are not an employee. You don't have an employment contract. So they say, yes, brother so-and-so has become this to us. And I accept. Suddenly, I have a member, we're in the church board, I'm the leadership team of the local church, and possibly 3/4 of them are undocumented. Pastor Majola, what do you do as a pastor? You figure out that you've pastored churches. You find that, okay, suddenly, for whatever reason, and it doesn't have to be now because of these matches. It could be possibly you just heard about it or you discover it. Oh, my elders are not documented. What do you do? What do you do?
Okay. Allow me quickly before I answer
Yeah,
the question.
You can go somewhere else if you want.
Yeah, because I mean, as people go, as my fellow panelists comment, sometimes I feel an itch, to
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before I come back to local church, two things. I just to deal with two things. The second will be your question. I want to affirm and echo the sentiments that well, whether Seventh-day Adventists or not, Christians must understand that there is no area of life in which the gospel is irrelevant. There is no topic that the church cannot touch. There is no topic that the church ought not to touch. So we need to have this correct understanding, first of all, before we talk about practice and application and so forth, that theoretically understand in your mind that the gospel is not just about Jesus is come to Jesus, confess your sins. Of course, I accept that is the predominant and the main issue of reconciliation with God. But the gospel is also social. And unfortunately, some of our members and leaders, some Adventists, some not Adventists, and other Christian churches as well, as history can support that, have had the understanding that the church should not touch political issues. There is no such thing. That is a fallacy. The gospel is political. not only political, it's more than political, but it is also political. Anything that human hands touch on this earth, God has something to say and do about it. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing that point is to say that the church, it will be a sad day if any church has leaders that sit in a meeting and take a resolution to the effect of this matter is a political one. We are not going to say anything about it. That would be a sad day. Now, by political, I'm not talking about ANC, IFP, DA, and political party. I'm not talking about political parties. I'm talking about political issues, social issues, systemic issues, issues of law and justice. A church that is silent, knowingly so, is a church that is complicit. So I think we need to have that understanding, firstly, as members of the church, as leaders in the churches, as pastors, as administrators, that the gospel is by nature a social one. When the Bible says we are the salt of the world, we are the light of the world, those are symbols that speak to permeation to every aspect of society. And of course, I do not go to the Old Testament as well, where you get very concrete examples of prophets walking in and telling a king what to do, what not to do, and thus said the Lord. So you cannot therefore say that the church ought not to touch this issue or that issue. Now, having said that, maybe let me I'll deal with other issues later on. Let me answer the question about what do you do. I think we have to understand the law in terms of the obligations of a church. I think you've already mentioned that the church as an employer, obviously, in terms of the Immigration Act and other statutes, has the obligation to or perhaps before I go there, let me just touch on something important, which will help us answer that question. Um, the question is it just or can it be just? Is it right for a member of a church, any church, a Christian, a believer, to engage in criminality? Now, if you understand Romans 13 and other parts of the Bible, that we have a duty as Christians and believers to respect authorities. So civil authorities, obviously it's not absolute, it's subject to God in as far as you don't have to obey a civil authority when, in terms of the belief now I'm talking about, if they are telling you to do something against God, okay? So I'm not dealing with a situation where there's a conflict between what the civil authority says and what God says. I'm dealing with a situation where what the civil authority says is not in conflict with the Bible. Now, in that scenario that I'm dealing with, I have a challenge. I have a question that we need to be able to answer. What do you do when a Christian engages in a criminal act? Because in terms of the law, it is said illegal immigrant, and it is a crime, prosecutable. You can be fined, you can be imprisoned. Now, if you are going to say, as a Christian, aside from circumstances where there's a conflict between God and state, where the state has a law in terms of territory, sovereignty, the borders are very clear, and I'm a Christian, and I decide to engage in an act of criminality as far as the state is concerned. I'm also a member of a church. Is that a right thing to do? Of course, we can then say, okay, well, I'm running away from a fire. Maybe there is a war where I'm coming from. Of course, that's when issues of asylum seeking and permits kick in. Now, here is a member who is not, doesn't qualify knowingly so for asylum and has no permit, has no visa, has no lawful presence in a country, and is, in terms of the laws of that country, committing an act of crime. I think that question needs to be answered as to what should be done, what can be done. I would say that as believers, fortunately, as I come close to your question, fortunately, the law in our country in South Africa is quite humane. The Immigration Act is very clear that you can assist an unlawful immigrant, illegal immigrant into a country under humanitarian conditions. There is hunger, there is no clothing the person has, and you are giving them food, you are giving them clothing. So the law allows that. It doesn't condemn you for helping someone in need, okay? But then the law does not have any requirement to my knowledge. If there is, I'm open to correction. To my knowledge, I've read the Immigration Act. Let me just check. I think it's section 47, 45 of the Immigration Act. It talks about persons, juristic persons such as churches and entities, persons other than organs of state. So that is where we fit in as a church or churches. It says they may be required by regulation to endeavor to ascertain the state. Now, this is not talking about employment circumstances. So obviously that's clear. If you are employing somebody as a church, you need to ascertain whether they are here lawfully or not. But otherwise, besides the employment circumstances, it says the statute, the law may regulate how organs of state or how private entities like the church may endeavor to ascertain the status or citizenship of the persons with whom they enter into commercial transactions. Now, if you go to the regulations, unless they've been amended, and I've missed the latest version, the church is not listed there. It lists banks, insurance companies, it talks about commercial entities, which may be regulated to ascertain before entering into commercial transactions with individuals, whether they are lawful or not lawfully in the country. But the church is not obliged when it comes at the level of a local church to ascertain as people walk in through the door as to are you here lawfully or not? Show us your ID. That is not within the mandate of the church. The law actually gives such powers to specific individuals, immigration officers. I don't have an authority to go around asking people to show their identity documents and so forth, particularly because there is no crime being committed by a church opening its doors to an illegal immigrant in as far as worship is concerned, because that is not employment. When it comes to issues of, for example, as you mentioned about local positions in the church, which are volunteer-based and not employment situations as defined or as interpreted in the Act, that doesn't appear to be what is contemplated by the Act in as far as prohibition. However, that doesn't mean that we should condone criminality. So if a member is committing a crime, what do you do as a church? If you believe that lawlessness is not must be tolerated within the church then would need to have a proper response that is balanced in as far as humanitarian assistance is concerned. But at the same time, it needs to distance itself from acts by individuals, because I might not be an illegal immigrant in the country, but maybe I am assisting people to be comfortable in their unlawfulness. By people, I'm talking about fellow members in the church. Now, in terms of the law, I may be doing that and going beyond humanitarian assistance and actually harboring them, as the law forbids me to do, providing commercial accommodation for them. Now, I might then find myself being convicted of a crime as a member of the church, as a citizen of the country, but who has now violated the immigration laws of the country. So the church needs to also understand that it's not just about illegal immigrants that they need to think about and consider, but they also need to consider their own members who may become complicit in the illegality or the unlawfulness or the criminality of the acts of other members who joined the church. So from where I stand, now I understand that there are circumstances that are different. Some people may qualify for proper immigration status, but they are being forced to offer money and to give bribes and so forth, and hence they find themselves faced with illegality. They have their kids here, they can't go home. We can't have one template to address each and every individual, but at the principal level, we must understand that I must say this because I'm a servant of the court, and I'm also a believer in Jesus Christ. And I believe Jesus doesn't condone criminality unless it is an act perhaps that is criminality, unless if not committing the crime would be against God himself, in as far as his mandate is given to you. For example, as you know, the Bible talks about worshiping. When it comes to worship issues, the
Yeah.
Ten Commandments, the first four deal with worship, the last six deal with social issues. So the government, fortunately, in our country doesn't really regulate worship. You can worship whatever you want, any stone you want to do. But if tomorrow there is to be there were to be a law that says you must worship on this day, worship on that day, or worship this god or that god, then will have to be forced to a situation where you might need to commit a crime, but in order to comply with the divine mandate.
Yeah.
But when you are committing a crime and you are not doing so in order to comply with the divine mandate, then that is where I think we have a big problem that we have to consider.
Yeah.
Let me
So,
stop
yeah,
there for
thank you.
now.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to come to Elder Chat to Dr. Chata now. I was reading Timothy, 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1. It's in summary, it says a leader in the church must be blameless. Must be blameless. But I raised that question about what do you do, Pastor Majola? I said, what do you do if you discover that your elders are undocumented? Deliberately, because it has become a topical issue. But when you read Titus and Timothy and other parts of it goes without saying. A leader must be blameless. A leader must be a role model. A leader carries moral authority and responsibility. So it goes that as Dr. Majola said, if you are, it is a contradiction in terms that you find yourself as a leader of a church, but you are breaking the laws of the country. You basically lose your moral authority. Yes, so Dr. Chata, okay, so that's that. Do we pick that up? Do we go around asking, or if we find out, then we have to deal with it as a church? I think that's where we are. Look, if I find, do we now have to go and check all our elders now? Churches, Pastor Nhlapo spoke about the churches. I know a lot of them. You basically have 90% of the members are not documented. And if you have a church of 60, 70 people, 90% are documented, it's very likely the half of the board or even the entire church board is not documented. So Dr. Chata, you're an elder as well. So do you now go around checking your fellow elders, your chief? Can you please come with the ID tomorrow? Let's see who is documented. You are muted. You have to unmute yourself. You are still muted, Dr. Chata.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I really appreciate the contribution by the previous panelist, Pastor Majola. I think he raised quite interesting and fundamental questions that are difficult to ignore, but perhaps in some situations not easy to answer, because situations render themselves in ways that are not straightforward and as clear. Because I was thinking of a scenario whereby there you are a pastor, preacher, you go to some place, whether some town or some remote place, and you do a fantastic job, 1 week of preaching. And people accept the gospel, they accept your message. and they volunteer to be baptized. As it has happened in the past, some of those that are ready to be baptized are undocumented. What do you do as an elder, as a pastor, as an evangelist? Yeah, should now you call for a roll call? And of course, if you do, and the people are honest, you will find those that are not documented. So do you say, no, thank you? No, we cannot allow your acceptance of the gospel. Sorry, stay there. I think that's how far the challenge goes. So the church will have to, perhaps, if it ends up that way, would have to find another category of believers. Those believers that are not in the books. because they've accepted Christ, but for the sake of the law, they cannot be recognized as such. Those are some of the practical situations. And again, talking about the issue of the state and the enforcement of the law, what comes to mind when we ponder that question is the unfortunate situation that happened in Rwanda a few years ago. And of course, we all know that our church was cited on the wrong side of the story, where most of our pastors, senior pastors for that matter, were found on the wrong side of the story, where they facilitated church members who sought refuge in their churches, in their homes. They facilitated their massacre. And one would say that what played in Rwanda was a very tricky situation, because there came a point whereby there was a fusion between the state and the church, in some instances, one would say, whereby this genocide was actually driven by the government, by the state. So some pastor or some individuals would have found themselves in a dilemma of saying, do I say no to the government? Because this is driven by the government authority. Should I hand over my people, my church members, or not? Unfortunately, for whatever reason, we will not know whether some people did that out of respect for the authority of government, or they did that because they also believed the mission was fine. So those are the situations. When do you say, okay, this is now complying with the law, and let me be legal, and as a church, I should not harbor some undocumented situation. So the challenge really here is that the issue of governance, like I intimated earlier on, the issue of governance is our best bet to control this problem. If at the source of the inflow, we are able to find a solution to determine who comes in, who doesn't come, half of our problem, maybe all of our problems in matters of dealing with migration are handled at that level. The moment that lever for controlling the inflow find itself weak, unintended elements within the flow will find themselves in the place. And therefore you find that everyone now is faced with a situation. How do we deal with this? So what I'm trying to get to is that we are safer as nations, as governments, to strengthen our governance architecture to the level that non-state entities should not worry about the things that are clearly in the mandate of the state agencies. It becomes easier.
That's the thing. I mean, we all have kids here, at least us on the panel. The thing is, there are things your kids not worry about. Yeah, yes. There are things my kids should not. They should not bed themselves about where is food going to come from, where is the rent, where is the fees? That's not the problem. The kids should not be burdened with that. So I think now we are sitting with a situation where, as churches, we now have to deal with this issue which the state need to deal with. Pastor Nhlapo, I'm going to come to you on that issue, because you said we need to sit around the table as a church and talk about this. As Dr. Chata said, it opens up certain questions which become very difficult to answer and not deal with. We don't have to have all the answers. He spoke about something which I had also raised in some discussion. I said, look, if we run an evangelistic campaign and we have somewhere and 200 people want baptized, and we check their status in the country before we baptize them? Because remember, as soon as we baptize, they become members. Membership in that church is through baptism. You see, you can't baptize and just be floating around. Our policies are very clear. Whoever baptize, we capture them, they become members. Which local congregation they become is a different story, because we can have a campaign in Johannesburg, then there are people from Cape Town who are visiting. So we direct them to where they are to say, okay, actually you live in Cape Town, maybe your membership should be at that church. But so as soon as someone gets baptized, illegal or legal, they become a member in our books. We need now to direct them. What do we do with a brother who is now a brother, as Paul talks about when he talks to Philemon about the Philemon story? He's now a brother. He's now a brother now. He's now a brother. He's not a slave. He's a brother. He's no longer an illegal immigrant. He's a brother. Now, he doesn't have papers, and he comes from across the borders. We baptize him, we have his membership. So what do we do with that guy? Do we say, we can't put you in our church here in Johannesburg because you are not documented? Then he says, I'm not going back home. He might say, look, okay, if that's the case, it's fine. Because he says, look, if I'm not going back home, I'm going to be here. So what am I going to do with that? Those are the dilemmas the church is facing. Look, with leadership, Pastor Majola, you ducked my question, but I'm going to give you an answer.
No, I'm coming back.
I'm ready. You're going to come back to that question. We need to say specifically that, and I gave you a hint about Titus and Timothy. Pastor Nhlapo, what do I do with that brother? And it happens, and then that also, and the issue of people are worshiping every Sabbath, who don't have leadership position, volunteer position, they come. We don't ask for papers. When you have a conversation as a church, as a union, as a division, as a general conference, where do we think we'll end?
Yes. Back in 1998, during what we call Pentecost 98 campaign.
Yes.
In this country, something very unprecedented happened there, triggered by a sermon by the man that was preaching there, the Jamaican gentleman who was preaching there, preached a sermon titled The Marriage of the Lamb. And in that sermon, he then says, if there is anyone in this audience that lives with a bride, a wife, without officially being married to the person, they need to come forward. Long story short, we married in that period more than 200 couples that came forward and declared. Some of them were church elders, were very surprised to see, oh, this man and his wife, they have children. We thought they are married, you know. We married more than 200 couples there. What I'm trying to say is leadership has to be intentional about this issue, the migration issue in this country. Much as we may not ask people, you know, it's a sensitive matter. Are you guys married? We see you and your wife sitting there. Are you guys married? We may not go there. We may not ask people at the door, are you legal in this country? Are you illegal? We may not do that. We may not even snitch on our members to law enforcement. It has happened already. We don't encourage that. But what I think should happen, I think we need to have, again, I'm going to use that word decisively so. Administratively and decisively, we need to issue a communique to all the churches in this union, where we advise members to regularize their immigration status. We have to do that. If we don't do that as leadership, as a church, we are exposing our members to other powers that are in the country. Imprisonment, deportation, being declared persona non grata for a period of 5 years or more in this country. And so what I want to encourage, what I want to propose is that leadership at union level, we will customize those letters when they cascade to conferences. They need to issue that communication to all the churches that have members that are illegal immigrants or undocumented migrants in this country, that go and regularize your status. That is the first point. The second point is, we cannot deny people, documented or undocumented, freedom of association, freedom of worship, or freedom of fellowship, to use a more Adventist term there. We cannot deny them that. We can't. We even provide fellowship or to people who are incarcerated in prisons. We visit them through programs like prison ministry and so on. And those that are in our midst, in our churches, we cannot deny them the privilege of worship. But however, and that is my second point, we have known that this member and the other member are not documented to be in South Africa. We may not give them positions. We may not appoint them in office in those local churches. They can worship as members, and they should worship as members, because we cannot deny them that. But we cannot knowingly give position to a person that we know to be illegal in South Africa. It is very important that our members within this union, within this conference even, where I am, should go and regularize their status, so that when all is well, in the pockets of constituencies where they come from, then they can return and assume jobs and businesses and so forth, according to the prescripts of the law. If we know that members are not documented within, that is, I'm talking to pastors. If pastors know that half of this church or that brother over there is not documented, my advice would be, redemptively, in the spirit of Christ, we need to engage that member, advise that member. It is our responsibility to do that. Now that we know, you know, to advise the member to go and make things right, so that there is no violation of immigration laws of South Africa by any of our church members. If we don't do that, and we have not begun to do that, by the way, and with due respect to my leaders, the letter has gone out, but it falls short to being decisive, to advise members to
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that is the first risk area. The second risk area is civil society itself, the groundswell, the neighborhood around which our members who are not documented live. People are saying enough is enough. So to protect our members, to protect them, we have to advise our members to go regularize. And if there is a way of even enabling them and assisting them as a church to go to countries where they come from, we can do that as a church so that people are regular as members of the church, but also as migrants in this country. That decisiveness is missing. That is what I would love to see, and that has to happen urgently.
Yeah.
We are not government, number one. Number two, we are not part of what unfortunately has evolved into vigilantism, like an organization we used to have back in 2016 in Western Cape called PAGAT, which was fighting a very just cause because it was against drugs. And people are selling drugs and killing young people with drugs and the rest of it and so forth. And some of the organizations within civil society are fighting a just cause. Illegality in South Africa. So to protect our members, that is what we need to issue, and we need to issue that as of yesterday already, so that our members will then go and make things right wherever they come from. And when they return, the church is ready to open our arms to welcome our members back who are now enjoying what I call regularity of status, immigration status in South Africa.
Thank you, Pastor. What we are saying and what you are saying is biblical, based on a very basic principle: obey the law. I mean, I don't think it's not even a debate. I think where we'll struggle is what you call this implementation and how it's done. But I think the principle that it is unchristian to be breaking the laws of the country, as Pastor Majola said, unless they are in contradiction with the gospel. It is unchristian. You can't be a Christian while you do that. And worse off, the bar is even higher for leadership. So maybe the one thing we can all say and you can say is that if you know that you are undocumented, please don't accept a leadership position in the church. At least that let's start there. Don't accept a leadership position in the church, because you are not a role model. You are not an example. You are basically, you can't worship God and be breaking the law. We are going to come slowly to the close. It's 25 to 9. We are going to get a few more views, and then we'll see what the questions are. I'm checking the views, the questions. Pastor Majola, you're going to come back to me about my question. because
yes,
that's why I'm asked that question. I'm asked that question because I know of pastors who have to deal with that question.
Yes.
So look, the good thing is that you are not in the frontline ministry anymore, so you can say whatever.
Yeah, look. I think there are three things that Pastor Nhlapo has already touched on as well, in as far as some guidelines that might be useful. Three things. Firstly, maybe let me start. The first point has to do with a particular provision in the law. The question was, now I'm saying this in response to the part of the question that has to do with whether we have to ask people now individually, are you here legally? Are you here not legally? And so forth. I'm dealing with that question. And my answer is no. Unless you are dealing with an employment situation, obviously you have to inquire about that. But you don't have to go around as baptized people, are you here legally? Are you here not legally? That's not what the law says. Section 42, subsection 2 of the Immigration Act, 42, subsection 2, it says, in any criminal, now this section deals with the aiding and abetting illegal foreigners, okay? The entire section. At the end of the section, it then says, in any criminal proceedings arising out of this section, a church, now I'm putting words into the act now, a church or a pastor or a church cannot, as a defense, where it has violated a provision of this section, as a defense, you can't say, well, I didn't know or we didn't know. If it can be proved that there was reasonable suspicion that such an individual is not in the country lawfully. So you don't have to go individually one by one. Are you here? Are you here legally? Show me your ID, show me your passport, and so forth. No. But the circumstances may arise where through conversations or through certain things you pick up about the individual, where they live, what they do, and so forth. Circumstances may arise where it is a reasonable person would suspect I think so and so is not here lawfully. Now, once there's a reasonable suspicion, you then have to follow up with that individual to ascertain as to what is their status in as far as their presence in the country is concerned. And of course, even if it's not about employment, but that will affect as to what you can and cannot do for the individual. For example, the law forbids that you provide them accommodation in as far as commercial contract and accommodation, leasing and letting property and so forth. So there'll be limitations as to what you can do as a church, because some members are residing in properties belonging to a church,
To the church,
and
yeah.
in some cases it's individuals. Okay, now so you don't have to go around asking people, but if circumstances arise that a reasonable person would say to themselves, I think so and so might be. Now you are a pastor, you are a leader, you are a church elder. So and so might not be here lawfully because of one, two, three, four. Then you have to inquire and do due diligence. Otherwise, the church is going to be held accountable for unlawfulness. Now, secondly, there's a question about the issue of baptism. I'm coming back to the elder. The issue of baptism. When you baptize a person, well, at least in our system, I'm not sure about all the other churches, but typically you don't say, if a person says to you, well, I vow never to commit adultery anymore. As long as there's that intention, as there's that vow the person makes, you baptize them. The same applies when it comes to issues of illegal immigration. If there has been something that has risen the alarm bell to say this person might not be here lawfully, and then you've inquired, don't have to inquire for everybody, but if there's some reasonable suspicion, you inquire from the person and you realize that this person is here unlawfully. Now, you have to then ascertain as to what are their intentions in as far as that unlawfulness is concerned. Because leading me to my third point about disrepute, I'm not aware in the Adventist SDA church manual, the policy when it comes to membership, of a provision that says you cannot be a member of the church if you are in that country unlawfully. So I don't believe that on that basis you can refuse baptism. But what may hook the person or deny the person the chance is the provision pertaining to disrepute. Because once you baptize somebody who tells you straight in the face, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not going to comply, I'm staying here, I'm not going to do anything that the law says I must do. I will remain in this criminal, I want to stay where I am, I'm going to do nothing about it. Now, you baptize a person who you know very well that tomorrow, after baptizing them, if your baptism were to go to the news, it will lead to disrepute in the church, then that can prevent them from being baptized. Not just per se that the person is not a member of the is not a lawful immigrant of the country, but you have to also think about the church, the risk you bring to the church, which takes me to the point about the elder. As Pastor Nhlapo did mention about the fact that, look, you are an elder, don't take a position because, and don't be given a position. If an elder, I discover the elder has no papers, of course, don't throw them away, don't throw the book at them, but you bring them to an awareness of the risk they are putting the church in. And I would suggest that such a person should be removed from office unless they voluntarily step down for the sake of the good name of the church. Um, and of course, but in terms of church membership discipline, I wouldn't go that far unless the conduct of the individual has led to disrepute against the church. That is when then the church member kicks in. But just the act itself of not being compliant with the law as far as immigration is concerned, in my view, in my opinion, I don't think that alone justifies disciplining a person, censure or removal from membership. But they need to know that their conduct is placing the church at risk, and should they be discovered or detected, they may be removed once their conduct, which is criminal, ends up bringing disrepute to the church. So I think that would be my answer in as far as some of the things that need to be considered by leadership when it comes to practical on the ground, addressing situations where an elder, a pastor, an elder is unlawfully here, and also a person wants to be baptized, but they are not yet members. They are not yet regularized in terms of the law. When it comes to baptism, intention is important. And you can baptize them. There's no problem with that, even while they're illegally here. But then we should be able, the person you baptize in that situation is the person that you can, as a church, assist, as Pastor Nhlapo was saying, because the church must be able to assist the person based on their individual circumstances, because circumstances are unique. You can't deal with everybody in the same way. So the person's answer to you before you baptize them must be one in which you can invite the church to assist the person through legal means to acquire regular status, so that they can enjoy the benefits of being here in the country lawfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have really been trying to be as exhaustive in what, because one of the questions which wanted to deal with is the issue: what can the church do? What can the church do? There is enough. I have a line in my note saying there is enough blame to go around for everybody. There is enough blame for everybody. The people who are not documented and knowingly stay, although they're not undocumented. The state, which is, as Dr. Chata said, has failed in many cases to manage this matter. The vigilantes who have maybe gone far in trying to deal with a legitimate concern. The church in its maybe looking away on the issue. And look, it's a difficult space. We know that, but leadership is difficult. Leadership was never easy, as Orovitz said. Hard things are hard. Leadership was never easy. So, so we need to come to a close. It's 1:45. Let's just wind up. Final comments. I'm not going to start any new questions. So I'll start with Dr. Chata, and final comments, brief, and then we'll
thank you,
close here.
Thank you, Professor, for the splendid facilitation. Yeah, my last remark would first of generally to appreciate the fellow panelists for the insightful interventions and ideas that came through. I think we all admitted at the beginning that we are dealing with a new phenomenon as a church, and perhaps we have arrived at the juncture where we deal with this matter where we have, like Pastor Nhlapo mentioned, we have historically as a church avoided it. It has come to a stage whereby it's no longer safe, it's no longer easy for the church, as a global church, to shy away from concerns that are in the society. Yeah, I want to agree in many aspects to the insistence that Pastor Nhlapo is bringing to the table, that leadership should take the lead on this matter. Right now, we are speaking in the context of our union, but we have already noted that migration is basically a global problem. It may not be hot as it is now in our union, in places like America, UK, and Australia, wherever, where we find Adventists and more so African migrants. The mechanics of the issue is basically the same as what we are experiencing in our union. The difference is that in South Africa, as a country, it has become such a hot issue as it is being discussed. So from that perspective, I would say I would agree with Pastor Nhlapo and Dr. Majola that the leadership is very crucial to take practical steps, towards providing guidance and the leadership on how these things should be. But being aware of that, we are part of a global movement. I think maybe as a contribution from our union, it would be good if this discussion can be escalated at higher levels, maybe even a discussion or a submission could be made where the church globally should discuss the issue of migration and its implications on members, on the laws of the different countries and whatever. It will be interesting to hear how and what other parts of the country or parts of the world are dealing with this issue before we even attempt to, at our level, to prescribe what should be done, so that as a global church, as we have done in many, or as we do in many aspects, we move and apply policies almost to the dot everywhere. So it will be interesting that as a church, global church, we have guidance and a policy stance on how to deal at a practical level on such issue. That will be, one of the recommendation I would make. Of course, we are a non, institution. We don't make binding recommendations, but as reflection, I would also encourage the church to start introducing at a very serious level conversations around intercultural communication, and intercultural skills and competencies on how to deal with the diversities and what have you. I'm tempted to read this statement, which I found very interesting. In 2021, a certain Craig Bailey, a South African who is a founding director of Bailey Leadership Consultancy, said this in terms of the importance of freedom of religion. Because even as we try to find mechanisms and ways of dealing with this, I think there's a fundamental thing that we cannot do, or we should not appear to do, because it's both a human right from the legal perspective, both at national level and international level, and also it's a divine injunction. the preservation of freedom of religion. So Bailey says this as my last statement. He says religion matters because it can reinforce the case for inherent human value and the necessary freedoms that follow from this. The freedom of practice, rather the freedom to practice one's religion, has been shown to have positive outcomes. Among these are contributions towards good governance, development, rule of law, peace and stability. So in whatever way we want to facilitate and manage this situation, we should not appear to be reducing or limiting the freedom of religion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to close with Pastor Nhlapo. Dr. Majola, do you have any other thing to say? Sorry, any other final comments? Then Pastor Nhlapo will close.
Yeah.
Will give us the final comments, and then we close.
All right, thank you. I think I just have three. Firstly, I want to appeal to everyone who's listening, particularly those who are in positions of leadership in the various churches, positions where there's policy direction, where there's strategic position direction given to churches and guidance and so forth, that the gospel is social, not just social, but it is social. Please do not lead the church in a direction that makes them careless or indifferent about the systemic issues in our country. Especially, I want to speak to Seventh-day Adventists who claim, and I don't challenge the claim, that we hold the three angels message, Revelation 14, 6 to 12, the beast, and all of those things. You cannot speak about the three angels and not talk about politics, because the three angels message is talking about political scenarios in our days. It's talking about economic issues in our days. It's talking about all the issues that pertain to systemic issues. You cannot be a Seventh-day Adventist communicating what you call the three angels message, and yet find yourself unable to engage when it comes to systemic issues. I'll avoid that political because there's political parties as part of that thinking, but let's just say systemic issues, so social systemic issues. This is one of the issues that must be dealt with. Number two, the church has a role to play. We don't have a role to play in terms of the law, enforcing the law. There are law enforcement agencies in place. In this case, the immigration officers, there are units investigate that enforce the law. There are courts that are in place, but the church's role has a role when it comes to moral persuasion. Moral persuasion of everybody. In this case, 30 June 2026, those who are leading the march, those who are afraid of those who are protesting, churches, politicians, everybody is our audience, persons that we can engage. And our contribution is the moral persuasion, which requires us to also be an example of what we urge and ask them to do. So moral persuasion is not just about communicating, but it's also about self-reflection, self-introspection, so that we don't appear or become hypocritical in our engagement with stakeholders. Lastly, I want to just say, crime is not a proper response to crime. So I say so because there are threats that some have articulated. I'm not talking about the leaders of the March and March movement. Well, the parts I've heard, there appears to be nothing that is direct, at least, that says that people are going to be injured or harmed or burnt or stoned. They're going to be killed. There doesn't seem to be that such a threat, because that to be a crime in itself. So in all our responses as community members, as a church, let us not go to the level of criminality, such as in threats. Two, under that, don't engage in derogative referencing and undignified or removing the dignity of individuals who are here unlawfully. They might be here unlawfully, they might need to regulate themselves, to regularize their stay. They might even in some cases need to go back home, but do not get into the rhetoric of removing or attacking their dignity and speak to them or about them as if they are less than you yourself. So in all our address to addressing the situation of unlawfulness, don't be arrogant, don't be proud, don't bring other people down. Address the issue, kick the ball, don't kick the man. And in all that we do, not just about crime, not just about respecting the dignity of those who are here unlawfully, but also keep in mind that Jesus says that we need to love. And that is the template that covers all response. Everything must be motivated and guided by the principle of love. And love is that which is going to be of assistance. And love is not hatred. Don't hate them. Some might be criminals, some might be part of syndicates. They might be as bad can be. But in the process of responding to evil that you perceive in your community, in your society, or in your church, don't go down to the level of hating them or not loving them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Majola. Pastor Nhlapo, your final comments. You need to unmute. Let me do that. Yeah, we lost. Yeah, you are unmuted. If you just speak.
Oh, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof, for putting together this roundtable. We greatly do appreciate this. It's timely. It's a burning issue that confronts the church as we speak. My closing remark would be that it is time for the church, the Adventist church within this union, to remain relevant and germane to social issues. For once, it is time for the church to rise to the occasion and to deal with this current issue that confronts the church. If we're never involved in social issues in the past, it is time to do so now before it is too late. I would like also to make a proposal, Prof, that the Southern Africa Union Conference, our SAU leadership, should without delay engage the SID, because migration is an SID phenomena. It's a reality in this division. Cross-border membership that we're experiencing, unfortunately, members that are not documented, it is an SID issue. We would wish for the SAU to, without any delay, invite the SID to convene around the issue of migration with a view to mitigate the massive challenge that all of us are sitting with here. Dr. Majola has taken the one line I wanted to have included in this closing comment, and that is, in the meantime, the church should unleash its social responsibility agencies, your ADRA, ACS, Dorcas, Meals on Wheels, to provide social relief to those who are traveling to countries like Malawi, Zimbabwe, and other countries, and provide supplies like medical supplies, sanitary supplies, and food to these persons as they go home to regularize their immigration status. And that is a service that we need to provide without delay. Supplies must be mobilized so that we are able to provide these supplies to all the buses that are leaving various areas like Durban, Pietermaritzburg, and other areas to Malawi, Zimbabwe, and other countries. Thank you so much, Prof, and God bless you and my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists. You have really made the task easy for the for the facilitator. I want to thank you very much for your willingness to be part of this conversation. And thank you to those who have been following and watching. We have tried to cover, I think, all the questions which were shared in one form or the other. So we're going to stop this live stream. And thank you once again for being here, and may God bless you. We might do a part 2 in the coming days, depending on what's going to happen. Thank you and God bless. Good night.